DJ Dogo, the Spin Guru.
If we do it on the activate, if you do that, you find it anyway. So that's it. For right and night, must not fight, day or night. People fly, you go good, as you should in your neighborhood. So that's it. Reggae music is live. Select and play it double wise. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. But something happens when you push it at a button. All the love starts going. I see my people dancing. Dancing till you never stop. Dancing on the mountain top. Dancing till you never stop. Keep on spinning like a top. Reggae music is live. Select and play it double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. That's the way we play. DJs chanting every day. Ask me a question, I'll tell you, read a revelation. Dancing till you never stop. Dancing on the mountain top. Dancing till you never stop. Keep on spinning like a top. Reggae music is live. Select and play your double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. And throw your fears away. Give giant up every day. It's gonna get real hot. Rasta running on the box. Dancing till you never stop. Dancing on the mountain top. Dancing till you never stop. Keep on spinning like a top. Reggae music is live. Select and play your double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. Reggae music is live. Select and drop it double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe.
DJ Dogo, the Spin Guru.
DJ Dogo, the Spin Guru.
Reggae music is live. Select and drop it double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. But that's the way we play. DJs chanting every day. Ask me a question, I'll tell you, need a revelation. Dancing till you never stop. Dancing on the mountain top. Dancing till you never stop. Keep on spinning like a top. Reggae music is live. Select and drop it double wide. Reggae music is live. Come on and feel the vibe. Yeah, I'm missing you.
Talk to you, but it's not the same as touching you. And every time you whisper my name, I wanna run to you. We'll be together, and it won't be long. It won't be long, but it seems like forever. Yeah, and it's hard on my own, baby, 'cause I'm missing you now, and it's driving me crazy. 'Cause I'm leaving my baby. I'm missing you now. Yeah. Can't wait alone, baby, 'cause I'm missing you now. Ooh. be holding you. I was much stronger. How could I know? How could I know? But it seems like forever. And it's hard to be strong, baby, 'cause I'm missing you now. And it's driving me crazy. I'm needing my baby. I'm missing you now. Yeah. Can I wait now, baby? Baby, 'cause I'm missing you now. Should I'm a baby?
I've been watching you, watching me, trying to get me through your misery. Your misery. Someone spreading rumors of me. I wonder who could it be? Someone out there eyes on me, saying things that they never see. But stop scandalizing my name over things that I know not about. Why is it I don't want to be playing? You watch me going in and you watch me coming out. It must be an informer. It must be a backbiter. It must be a vampire who want me to suffer under the pressure. It must be an informer. It must be a backbiter. It must be a vampire, but I'm burning up like a fire. I have no secret for no one to keep, so you can say what you want to say. You never see me play hide and seek. I try to live in a positive way. Can't you see that I'm innocent, but you're trying to find me guilty? I will never lose my confidence, so don't disrespect my integrity. It must be an informer. It must be a backbiter. It must be a vampire who want me to suffer under the pressure. It must be an informer. It must be a backbiter. It must be a vampire, but I'm burning up like a fire. I've been watching you, watching me. I'm with your misery, your misery. I've been watching you, watching me. Yeah. Someone spreading rumors of me. I wonder who could it be? Someone out there eyes on me, saying things that they never see. But stop scandalizing my name for the things that I know not about. Why is it I'm the one to be playing? You watch me going in and you watch me coming out. It must be an informer. It must be a backbiter. It must be a vampire who want me to suffer under the pressure.
Be alright. It's alright.
DJ Dogo.
The Father, life showers of blessings on me. I give praises to Jah the Creator, for someone as lovely as she's the greatest part of my life, like no other woman I see. And when the pressures of life pull me over, she's my refuge, my sanctuary. Tonight I'm gonna hold her tight, raise her right. I'll never let her out of my sight. Can't do no wrong, feeling so strong. She gives me satisfaction's guaranteed. Now, got to get a chance to plant my seed. Ooh, you got to be your real. say to Mary, tonight I'm gonna hold her tight, squeeze her right. I never let her out of my sight. Can't do no wrong, feeling so strong. She gives me satisfaction's guaranteed. For your dancing feet, some of them in the corner, I drink them rum. Drink your rum and tumble down, yeah. In that next corner, you'll find the fly girls. My girls, they might do all the style and the million style, yeah. System playing the music to keep you skanking. It's your operator. Now we know you are the creator. Play them style up in everybody. Walk like this, yeah. Walk like in the shoe be. Lord of mercy, walk right in. Walk right in the shoe be, yes. Lord of mercy, boy. Girls like sand to match every man. Music like earth, but you're not this man. Walk right in. Right in the shoe be.
Level up, DJ Dogo, the Spin Guru.
If you move your hand with your big quad cup, please don't let it stay there full and keep running over. Man, if you move your hand with that big quad cup, don't let it stay there full and keep running over. My command is, give the youth a try, give the youth a try. Let them even suck their mother's milk and even eat bread. Don't know how to pray. So give the youth a try, give the youth a try one more time. Let them even suck their mother's milk and even eat bread. You, Mr. Happy, greedy man, oh, happy. But just I love rock the pen and down, no Mr. Happy.
Why? Come on, you got chicken bone and scorpion
softly move your arm with your big quad cup. Please don't let it stay there full and running over. Mom, give the youth a try, give the youth a try one more time. Let them suck their mother's milk and leave them eat bread. I know they're all suffering, and it's a happy, lock the prison door.
Hi, I trade online on IQ Auction.
Old penny 20.
Now I'll show you how.
Times be the laps while on the key.
Choose
That's
an
not the
outfit.
jailhouse key. And that a back you go, and that a big you go. And because you can tell life and you can send them a prison. And it's a happy, share it. You happy. But don't have your pump and pride. And it's a yes. Oh, yes. I have a story to tell
down for another. And what, lady, are you showing me? Did you mean to tell me it put you out? It put you out and I'll take you in and give you loving that I remembering. So much more I have in store for you. If you should ever feel down and out, call me up and I'll take you out. You never knew the sweetness of your love. Oh yeah. Say what, lady? Oh yeah. Saying to me, did you mean to tell me it put you down for another? And what, lady? Oh yeah. Show with me, did you mean to tell me it threw you out?
Or a 24.
Another loss is another man's gain. I'm in the position to ease your pain. I'll build a stream of me and you. Oh, yeah. So tell me when you're coming home. I promise you will never be alone. Set a table, baby, just for two. Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, yeah. Say what, lady? Oh, yeah. Saying to me, did you mean to tell me put you out for another? Then what, lady? Oh, yeah. Saying to me, did you mean to tell me? Oh, yeah. Don't promise you that I'll give you the world, but I sure treat you right. Not like it did before, baby. I never put you down. No way, baby, baby, baby. I never will. No. Say what, lady? Oh, yeah. Saying to me, did you mean to tell me it put you down for another? Say what?
I can't take it no more. Baby, if I walk out that door, you know I won't be coming back again. Why you torturing me, baby, with your sad misery? You know I think it's time to let it end. walk out that door, you know I won't be coming back again. Why you torturing me, baby, with your sad misery? You know I think it's time to let it end. Girl, I don't know what to do. Every time I get next to you, you say yes, you say no, you say come, then you say go. Oh baby, you're a cheater and you're hurting me bad. I don't know what to do. Every time I get next to you, you say yes, you say no, you say come, then you say go. Oh baby, you're a cheater and you're hurting me bad. I don't know what to do. Every time I get next to you, you say yes, you say no, you say come, then you say go. Oh baby, you're a cheater and you're hurting me bad.
www.djshinsky.com.
The emperor, the conqueror, the
DJ Lighter.
Kuna F za kugiviwa za mine zime left.
Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Niko na pesa kushinda babako. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Kasikia vibaya.
Angie, body. Shake your body.
Ukini kuna bag, nitako kuna front.
Shake your body.
Ukini kuna bag, nitako kuna front. Ebo baby, don't let go.
Ni wako, akiwa kwako, akitoka nje, ni wetu. Muulize, ndio akuje kwako, alikuwa wapi, si alikuwa kwetu.
Angela, I know you like teasing, I know you like freaking, I know you sound easy.
Kumbafu nyinyi, think twice bwana.
Mambo imechemuka, ati nini? Mambo imechemuka, alo, mambo imechemuka.
Download DJ Lighter, mix it on www.djlighter.co.ke. Chemi za uongo, story za jaba ndo tingize mbongo. Ndo bebe kawale tikiza kamongo. Bari barabara bana maringo. Niko na pesa kushinda babako. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu.
Niko na pesa na ni za babako.
Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu.
Lifika jiji nikakutana na budako, akaniambia kanivaa kwa pendagi za mamako. Kisirisiri tukakutana kwako, ni click bang tujuu ya kitanda chako.
Hamna hela nini mnateseka nyinyi, unalipa madeni na pochi yako. Miaka ni 20 huko chini 60 na neti unatuvunjia mgongo.
Ulinipaka chance na nikapita nako, uliponipiga intro siku ya introduction. Anani finance na school fees zako, alinipeanga info kwanza yesi babako.
Unapenda wa baba, hune watoto wako huruma. One shot na kwani upendi utamu wa nduma. Pesa ukutekenya sana, werudi ukakunewa baba. Niko na huruma kushinda babako. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu.
Niko na pesa na ni za babako.
Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu, kasikia vibaya uko kwenu. Kasikia vibaya uko kwenu.
Nacho nasikia vibaya.
Ni vibaya.
Vibaya.
Nenda zako.
Sinaenda kwenyu.
Kwetu wapi?
Kwa babako.
Mimi sikutusi lakini kudadadeki.
Sikudharau lakini udungandula la feki.
Uso marangi uko shua hauni seti.
Cake and bake ni quality za Fenty.
Chemi za uongo, stories za jaba ndo tingize utongo. Ndo bebe kawale tikiza kamongo. Bari barabara bana maringo. Niko na pesa kushinda babako.
Singekubali kwa kwanza kupiga simu. Nikisikia kupiga Karoka na niambia usipige. Sasa niko single. Juu ya ego nilingoja nipigie. Alitoka kapigia chali mwingine. Imagine ningeweka ego chini, nipige simu ningekuwa na bibi. Imagine nilichagua ego na yo life ikani humble. Nilikuwa na best alikuwa naitwa Ego. Nilikuwa napenda sana form za Ego. Nimepoteza vitu mob juu ya Ego. Akoka Ego. Punguza Ego. Ego. A rich man's joke is always funny. So funny. Tunacheka na unabo. We just want your money. Your money. Tunapapasa ego. Ndotoboke mfuko. Tukule pesa yako. Tukimaliza tukuwache peke yako. Ni juzi tu manzi ulienda Dubai. Ukikuja Kenya unajidai. Is it safe? Uko umo ni safe? Sulizaliwa uko. Punguza tumaringo. Achaka ego. Msupa kabla life ikuhambo. Nilikuwa na best alikuwa naitwa Ego. Nilikuwa napenda sana form za Ego. Nimepoteza vitu mob juu ya Ego. Akoka Ego. Punguza Ego. Ego. DJ like that, take it well right with the girl them.
Na jam juna ngojo maskani sana kwa hamu na gam. Kawesi beshe damu misi wezi kuita famu. Kuna maina kwa sherehe mshoa naitwa na mam. Jumasani ya heavy chunga masani ya dhambi. Yasi watake ntu na wababa wa vitambi. Kamkopo kalijipa basi leo si changi. Jumikisha ni ya remi na pombe za Kariobangi. Hangopa kesho takuwa kaya watu wawili. Mara moja itabidi nimemeza mara mbili. Lakini haidhuru bora vako tuziseti picha. Tunachoma sana tu kwa sababu ya happy. Recipe ya happy. Recipe ya happy. Maganji, washikaji, vinywaji ndo recipe ya happy. Happy. Recipe ya happy. Maganji, washikaji, vinywaji ndo recipe ya happy. Nenenga kila mundu kile anadai kubai. Itema ikio vivi atanama ya ofrai. Kaketa wakachazi kunea musembi muya au kena twele tunaidi mama brade. Kamba na mapose sako lili change na vepeka na maboss. Niki come around so najua how it goes. Mr. Bragg na do nikuta kwa meno niki flows. Dakika mbili tumebonga 1 hour. Tumemake El Nino na ma champagne showers. Tiba ya kuchapa sini pesa ndiyo dawa. Siri ya kukaa fly sini pesa ndiyo mabawa. Recipe ya happy.
Majuka ni kama
kama unarusha mamikono tingisha kichwa chungu sivunje kisogo teremuka teremuka kakonokono basi ni kionjo twende mamio ndoko mamio mio 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 ndoko mamio 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 ndoko mamio mio 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 ndoko sasi inadonjo wasi ni kumoto mamio mio 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 ndoko mamio 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 ndoko mamio mio 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 ndoko sasi inadonjo wasi ni kumoto
kaleka dance cheki kaleka dance kwanza kiwa kijaba ndo napewa kichance low but sure no kizito gonna relax rusha mikono juni kama hujui kudance toa kofia na mkono kulia pa panguza kiharaba notoe kijasho moonlight love kwa jua na mpango wa kando ndo kisianda maidhana madhano
mami ondoko mami sipoko kakuna njoti tunachana na popcorn ongeza flow na doju tumedonjo alisema ni faste but hiyo ni uongo sikienyeji huyo dem ni mwitu si true niliacha chuo ni pedipitu itu ndani ya msitu iko na jitu please tu nimemada hariwa shukitu
mamio mio 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 ndoko mamio 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 ndoko mamio mio 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 ndoko sasi inadonjo wasi ni kumoto mamio mio 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 ndoko mamio 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 ndoko mamio mio 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 ndoko sasi inadonjo wasi ni kumoto
Twitter at DJF2KE. At DJF2KE.
You're the one for me. One on one is two, and it's a huge. Yes, girl, I'm talking about my baby. The love you offer me, you turn it to a family. Now your dad listens to you in a different light. But me know when I got you, it's alright. Now I can never more the east, no what. And that's why I'm moonlight lover. I'm a moonlight lover. Me tell you, can't find you want to come over now. I'm a moonlight lover. There is no other. You are my love. Come correct. It doesn't matter in your home, because you can't find your love is gonna come around. You are my love, I'm a moonlight lover. Yes, you are my love. You are my love, I'm a moonlight lover. Moonlight lover. Boy. You are my love. You are my lover. Swing in the moonlight. I didn't never love it. It was upside. But I don't hear anymore what you say. Till everyone else go on the show what you say. First give me wine and dine. After that day I will dance and caress you. Undress you with my boo-boo. You know by now, girl, I love you. Everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. Well, everybody telling me to. All over and over. Everybody telling me to.
DJ F2.
Everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. Well, everybody telling me to. All over America. Everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. Well, everybody telling me to. All over America. I want the whole wide world to know that Pato Bantan is on the go. Just like a tree that planted by the rivers of water, I will surely grow. Every day I kneel and pray that Jah will guide me on my way. I wanna be good, yes, I want to do right, and I don't wanna go astray. People tell me yes they do. They say Pato Bantan we love you. That's why I want to dedicate this song to every one of you, to every friend and every fan and every radio DJ too, every reggae reporter, producer, promoter. I just like to say thank you, and all the youths I stand and salute for staying loyal to the reggae roots. They give me the strength to push on through, because they tell me to go far. Everybody telling me to. Well, everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. All over America. Well, everybody telling me to. Yes, everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. All over America. I want the whole wide world to know that Pato Bantan is on the go. Just like a tree that planted by the rivers of the I will surely grow. Every day I kneel and pray that Jah will guide me on my way. I wanna be good, yes, I wanna do right, and I don't want to go astray. People tell me yes they do. They say Pato Bantan we love you. That's why I want to dedicate this song to every one of you, to every friend and every fan and every radio DJ too, every reggae reporter, producer, promoter. I just like to say thank you, and all the youths I stand and salute for staying loyal to the reggae roots. They give me the strength to push on through, because them a tell me to go far. Everybody telling me to. Yes, everybody telling me to. Everybody telling me to. All over America.
Reasons why I love you, one. You like my day, you are my son. Reasons why I love you too. I cannot get enough of you. Reasons why I love you, Trey. I know that you'll be true to me. The reason I will stay with you, I know you love me too.
DJ F2.
The reason I will stay with you,
The Hype Master.
know that you love me too. Oh, so yeah.
baby, hurry up and come. My wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make love all night, all day. Wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make love, yeah. Me just want the weekend to home, well, want see you. Have a package, I know, well, want gear. Check in for my base, you know, when I have to go, I re-up me. You want some wine, what a real nice trio. Me have the remedy, mixed with the energy. And the game we gotta play, no need no referee. Set me free, set me free. Use the love and come rescue me. My wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make love all night, all day. Wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make love, yeah. All week, man, I feed power, come and stop her. You know, back them, I like just a go over, so with your wapper, come here, give it to you good, give it to you proper. Make your ball fit it up, and no man, the rita, topper. Pam, pam, bust up the rules, back to cover. All weekend, man, I go fast, so saddle up, man, no bluffer. I'm never give it to you good, give it to you proper. Natural kind of lover, you will never need another. My wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make love all night, all day. Wicked love, yeah, yeah. When we make
F2.
Everybody feeling irate. No bad vibes in this party. Step in with my queen beside me. Dancing till I'm morning. It's a lively feeling. I'm feeling irate. Everybody move, everybody like.
Luka na kamche. Unajua enda kamche?
Ai saga, unajua naeka.
Hey, we no wanna trouble at your night. So no wanna go to fight. Not till it vibes now. Yeah, me see a girl in a delight. When you bubble in a tight and I look my way. Girl, you look nice. But me there with my wife. Me not this, could never this. Compliments, select, I play this one. La 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 la. Well, everybody feeling irate. La 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 la. No bad vibes in this party. La 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 la. Girls who are tight, all man go easy. La 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 la. Strictly good vibe in the party.
People the lame have to get up and go. Now when you hear a rhythm like this, you have to move. Everyone have on them dancing shoes and a jump up like say them hear good news. Traveling for the highway, me a cruise and I listen some sweet reggae music me choose. Now distraction can get me confused. Give thanks, me no have nothing to lose. Massive over your soul and the massive over the sun. And in at me ear can the DJ say so. If you come from the suburbs or the ghetto, let me hear everybody voice echo.
Going all over town, searching to find you, baby.
The Hype Master.
Someone who can understand me. Yeah.
Mbona muongeleshe dada huyu? Kangenikwamia.
Kwani iko aje?
Kako wapi bebe?
Kako kaliomoka.
Eh?
Mbaya sana.
Mkamba akiomoka hatari.
Ashakuwa katajiri yako.
Mkamba akiomoka na nikafupi.
Akashika ile simu zetu hapo.
Aliomoka.
Mlimroga.
Yeye alituroga. Mimi si mkamba.
Nakwenda kwa ndani. Lakini na yeye.
Mchawi wako wapi?
Chai ya kwa sababu.
Yes.
Mchawi. Deals zako bana.
Ugonga boni?
Deals zako.
Iko loud sana.
Ati iko loud sana, hapana usifanye kama last time hapa.
Iko loud sana. Unajua last time nilikuwa naingia kwa microphone.
Deals za mchawi ni mbo, lakini tutavumilia tu sasa.
Kalitoka KBC.
Hata kifo
Bonge
ina take time.
Hebu nyamaza kwa. Bonge boni? Hey.
Maina. Iko loud.
Liko ni nini? Tulifu kwa microphone.
Last time stima ilipotea kazini cheki.
Ilipotea hewani?
Huko.
Last time
Hebu ongea banya.
ilikuwa devolution.
Maina ongea.
Stima ilipotea mkiwa hewani. Na haja Irena ninenge story.
Ongea, Maina ongea. Niambie kipunguka. Hapo. Hapo.
Ingiza kidogo.
Hapo.
Iko ndani. Mgeni akiwa
Ilibidi uende na swali najua.
Kesa kuongea kuna giza.
Basi mwacha house lights zote.
Hata yeye apige hesabu. Anaonelea kuongea.
Mkaenda break.
Baba station.
Ulikuwa umelipa mchawi? Mchawi anaweza kuwa alikuvurutia chini. It'll take how long?
Around 45 seconds.
Wa, hiyo ni long sana.
Wana guest aliongea na giza. Nisikia kucheka na hilo Mungu nisaidie.
Sasa ikikuja, ikarudi. Sijate imepiki. Sasa tuko sure stima ikirudi tena.
Tena ikaenda blackout.
Tena.
Ulienda blackout twice.
Guest akasema nataka link yake na unajua nini likatika. Jona kale. Alina ya Facebook ndo alipata. Ya Facebook ingine. Sawa. Na leo guest alikuwa maana.
Mimi najua ni done. Hiyo yote si hakuna problem. Kijaribu kuremove mchawi. Si ndio hii mimi nimedunga. Si nimedunga, nilikuwa napiga story na nimeasha. Mchawi is very much okay.
Who's the mchawi in this case?
Sana kusikia anajijua.
Ndoza ushuru.
Unatoka anatumaliza. Anatumaliza.
Miaka kambo 10 ishe.
10 fresh.
Ndio hii mwezi tuko na half salary juu housing finance ni double tax.
Okay, walisema badana anatax mara mbili.
Si ndio kwani? Si memo ilitoka kila mahali.
Sasa hiyo. Na nataka kuguza na sasa tutafanya nini? Nani? Wewe ndio kuletea nini? Situmbe kama mche. Wewe kama mche wewe.
Hapana, hata hiyo mbona siwezi taka.
Acha jaribu. Unajua kama ni watu resilient sana.
Sasa nikuonyesha wewe kama mche.
Hebu muoneshe wewe nijua jamuona ai.
Ni kama kapombe.
Si kapombe, kama ni kapienga sana.
Nakwambia ni kama kapombe tu. Kapombe ni kapia ni kama spirit.
Unajua hao modemu wazimu, mtu mwenye anakawindanga ni wazimu.
Kama Florence Ndumu. Nakajua sina kaona.
Kamche na hii kitu tuliwini. Nakanda tu tangazia mtu ati kalipata.
Kazuri physically lakini nayo tabia na here.
Hiyo ndio kidogo. Mulo hawezi.
Kwanza mimi mtu akanizaje ndani tu.
Anazungumza Chief Kunga.
Anazungumza sana?
Kuongea? Kuongea kamche?
Sana. Unajua wewe umjui mimi nakwambia. Tumeenda safari hiyo venye tumeenda. Sikaribu wapigane huko na producer wake. Kwa nini?
Shida ni nini?
How do you people fight of work?
After 9 PM bulletin tulikuwa tunafanya interview from location. Sasa hao wameenda kula. Sasa after tumemaliza crew tukaenda kukula. Drinks zikakuja.
Basi.
Za bure. Serikali, mizinga, black label, double kila mtu akona yake hapa. Morris, unajua Morris? Producer. Sasa hataki kutoka.
Akamate.
Hata mimi sitaki. Agado. Kila mtu
siko.
Na vile Morris anapenda kamnywe. Yo.
Sasa Kamche anasema amechoka hata kwenda driver ampeleke. Na driver anasema siende trip mbili.
Mtoke wote.
Twende wote na basi. Acha tuingie basi hivi Kamche ameaka moto.
Anawakia basi nzima.
Acha anze kutusiana na producer yake. Unajua alileta guest kama tumeenda live. Na Morris akamwambia sieke Malombe hewani mtoe hapo. Kumbe amechukua hia.
Na Malombe. Governor.
Hayo. Peke yake mwenyewe.
Yaani huyo mama aliongea mpaka nikasema huyu akakuwa bibi yangu akiadani wanazika. Napiga.
Cost anakwanga. Welcome. Okay. Have a seat, kindly. No, it's fine. I think, what's the time? We have like 20 minutes. Still have like 20 minutes, yeah. I'm fine. Oh, the law school, the school of law. Thank you. Where did you study law? Casey? In 17. So you've been practicing for like almost
till in 2020 towards the end.
Because you're kind of
towards the end, Kenya School of Law, and a bit of pupillage and there. Took some bit of time.
Wakili, you say he's comfortable with that makeup.
Let her do her thing.
It's actually Simpaki makeup.
So you admitted to the bank?
Thank you. Yeah, in 2020, towards the end. It was in September. So I count the whole of 2021. Mixed reaction. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's hectic, but it's quite an adventure. It's interesting.
You cover all aspects. I hear some lawyers tell me I cover.
As a young lawyer, you don't go sieving, choosing, or being choosy that I do this, I don't do that. Because if you say you can do this and can't handle that, I mean, you'll have a very limited client base, and you may not. For those of us who now have gone into private practice, so you have to do everything so that at least you create your client base. People know you as a general lawyer, but they know you're perfect in some areas. But you take everything and
it's interesting.
That's what you do. You student here?
No, I'm not a student here. I work here.
Oh, you work here?
I work here.
Okay.
How do I put it? I work for a different media house and still work here.
So you're in several other outlets?
Yeah, I used to work here, then moved out. I went to Capital. Then they called me back to do this show.
Capital FM.
Capital FM. So they called me back to do the show. And then I talked to my bosses. There was no particular conflict of interest. So that's how I'm doing this. Yeah.
So like you're not here full time.
I just come to do the show on
every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. And then now other days I'm usually based in Parliament.
Okay.
Reporting for Capital.
For Capital.
Yeah.
So and when you're here every Tuesday evening, you handle handling legal topics.
Yeah, legal topics.
Purely on legal topics.
Legal topics, we get to choose the topic to discuss. The producers choose.
Yeah.
Though I prefer when I'm choosing,
Okay.
because I feel like I'm more connected to what is happening in terms of legal matters due to the field, what I'm doing in the field.
Yeah.
So yeah, the producers get to choose, and then now we discuss the topic of discussion. This one, registration of churches.
Yeah.
I think 3 months ago, immediately after Shakahola,
Yes.
we had. It's okay. It's okay.
Hello? Hello? Yeah. Umefika? Yeah. I'm already here. I'm inside the recording room. So if you forget, recording room. It's the big room, recording room. Why not? Wambie you are among the co-guests. Yeah, watakubali. Recording room, first floor. Niko hapo ndani already. I'm going through the preps. Okay. Sorry, Irene.
It's okay. So, the topic of discussion concerning registration of churches, we had done one immediately after the Shakahola massacre on the freedom of religion and how easy it is to regulate that. So, the topic that is there today is almost more or less links to each other. Though this particular time we'll be looking into regulation of churches in terms of the register of societies. Given that they're saying the statistics, we are having 4,000 churches. Is there a way to limit the number of churches as other countries have done, like Rwanda? And in limiting registration of churches, the ones that we have so far, what can be done in terms of regulating them? Because the regulation is not on the aspect of just giving them a certificate of registration. It goes beyond that to moving into monitoring the activities, because the registrar, yes, Irene Mwangi, the registrar of society had said that they are tied. Once they register, they don't have a mechanism or the leeway to follow up on what happens beyond certification stage. So is it one of the challenges that now is an issue when it comes to registration of churches? Can one move to the register of societies having complied in terms of the registration
requirements?
Yeah, so they want your audio, so can you introduce yourself?
Who wants it?
There, but you can
How
just
do I
speak.
face?
No, anyway, just talk to me.
Okay.
So do you think there is more that should be done in terms of regulation of churches?
I think in the advent of the matters current and the deregistration, the ongoing deregistration of some churches based on some what is perceived to be bad conduct by those religious leaders. Good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so I think there's need for the government of the day to perhaps bring more regulations, more strict compliance measures, sort of, to ensure that the existing and the upcoming religious organizations or the religious environment adheres to good code of conduct and ethics that protects the safety of the citizenry and people who attend such worshiping spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with Kenya being a secular state, how then can they regulate the issue of regulation of churches, given that we have the laws prescribe that we are a secular state, and therefore
Mhm.
we do not ascribe to any particular religion, then how possible then can we interfere with regulation of churches to that extent?
I like to not call it interference, as the government is the stakeholder, or rather is the custodian of the protection of the people. And even religious societies and leaders in their practice and congregation of various members of the community, they ought to serve their doctrines and teachings in an environment that observes the protection of the people of the government. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, this same government is the one that is tasked with the responsibility to ensure strict compliance to the human rights, and also if a society or an individual tends to go against the human rights as provided for under the Constitution, then the government is also tasked through various agencies and law enforcing authorities to ensure that the people are protected and their safety is ensured. And that is not to say that interference is being crept into matters religion. So it is important that these religious corporations or religious societies also observe the safety of the people, and the safety of the people is a mandatory responsibility of the government. So the government is not interfering with the religion. The government is trying to ensure that religion also observes the security of the people.
Is there any minimum qualification that should be given for pastors to say be recognized as pastors to manage a church or something?
Yes, traditionally I think it has never been for one to become a religious leader, they ought to attain a certain standards or threshold of qualification. But it has been an argument, and the government of the day through the sector-specific departments have argued that it is important for religious leaders to have at least minimum qualifications, as these churches can also be taken to be professionals. Religious leaders should be professional, and like any other professions, professionals are supposed to observe certain code of conduct and also have certain qualifications for them to be perceived to be perfectly professional, and that will ensure adequate and proper conduct of religious business by those religious leaders. So it is good to treat them as professionals.
So which then them having them having the what is it called? The KRA certificate, the KRA compliance certificate. In the case of Paul Mackenzie, when they wanted to trace his money transaction on the tail end, they found that the gentleman had no bank account. He was not, therefore they could not trace how he was receiving money, but all these people were selling their house.
Framework. Most importantly, the Income Tax Act. It exempts churches, church income through tithings, offerings, and any other revenue that is channeled towards a promotion of religious activities is exempt from taxation. However, it is not a blanket exemption of churches to not comply with KRA requirements, because under the same act, it is also a requirement that a church has to apply for and attain a tax exemption certificate. That is a document that will caution or protect the church's income that is channeled towards religious activities from being taxed. However, it has to be remembered that churches can also attain and manage assets, properties, and even conduct business activities as a distinct entity from its owners and the members. And the same act provides that if a church, through certain business activities, does gain income or does generate some sort of money through their business activities, then it is a requirement that such activities should be regulated by the Income Tax Act, and they have to do their proper and accurate returns. They have to remit that returns appropriately and pay taxes from certain income that is not exempt as we provided for under the sector-specific legal framework, the Income Tax Act.
All right. Yeah. Now, there was a scenario whereby the Catholic Church had a row between one of the saints' churches, yes, over property. That time it involved that guy, the former cardinal. He was a Kikuyu guy. I can't remember his name.
I also can't remember his name.
But he was at the center of that row, and it was between the sisters and one of the parishes or something. So, in such cases, it's usually properly stipulated, or do we have cases whereby some board members can gang up to, take up the church properties, given that it is alienated from the members of the church? It is now the entity of the church, such as the board members, and who has been enlisted as the owner of the church.
Can I pick a call?
Yeah, sure. It's not
yet.
like
Sure, there's a call here. I'm trying. Hello? Umeingia ndani?
Umepotea? You can I can send somebody to come and pick you. Oh my God. Paul. Oh, kuna guest, kuna somebody is coming in. He's outside. She's outside. Kuna mtu anafaa kuingia, msee mchukue hapa. I can't remember his name. Ama acha Mulwa ndio achukue. Mulwa. Mmoja.
Churches, and so management of such properties cannot be private. It is a church activity, and whether it is current or upcoming board members or officials of an organization, of a church, then they have to do that in a transparent and accountable fashion. That is to say, every activity has to be documented. Every business that touches on church property has to be documented and communicated to the church members. Okay. And if that is done, then there cannot be certain disputes between members or officials as regarding church business.
All right.
Yeah, and assets.
So we're going to start in 2 minutes.
Okay.
We're having 3 parts of the...
Am I okay? The mom said it?
Yeah. Bonnie, amekaa sawa? Ameketi vizuri?
Oh, sawa.
So we're going to... there are 3 segments to the show. The first part is just the preamble. Then we get to practical examples.
Okay.
And then the tail end to bring the discussion to a close.
Oh. I hope it will be easy and we have a conversation.
Sure, sure.
I'd love to be a regular host.
You can.
Sorry, guest to your show.
Yeah, you can. You can tell us which topics you are most inclined to.
Okay.
And then now when we are working on them, we bought this stuff. So you're okay being called Wakili or Nsongo?
Nsongo. Wakili or Nsongo. Any can do both.
Nsongo. I hope I don't Nsongo.
And it's Irene.
Yeah, it's Irene. Kenya is largely a religious nation, being a home to over 4,000 churches that have been registered here in the country. This has made it open to exploitation on the basis of religion. And at the beginning of the week, we saw the Registrar of Societies revoke license of 5 churches due to cases of not adhering to regulations. And so tonight on Law Matters, a show that is educative, informative, and offers legal aid solution to what we face on our day-to-day lives, we are looking into the issue of regulation of churches. Be sure to send in your questions and feedback concerning this particular show on our social media platforms at KUTV Kenya on Facebook, at KUTV_Kenya on Twitter, and KUTV Kenya on YouTube. My name is Irene Mwangi, but before we get into the nitty-gritties of this particular discussion, let me allow my guest to introduce himself. Kindly.
Thank you. Good evening. And thank you for having me in your studios this night. My name is Elvin Onsongo. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, practicing as such within the City County of Nairobi, the CBD.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wakili Nsongo, for joining us tonight and making time. Perhaps given the recent reactions you have seen and unfolding that you have seen concerning churches, given the Shakahola massacre, and also recently the Registrar of Societies revoking the licenses of 5 churches, what does the law say concerning regulation of churches, given that we are having a huge number, 4,000 churches registered so far?
Yes, to begin with, I think it's important to address the issue from a very key legal perspective, being the Constitution of Kenya, 2010. And it is important to note that from the preamble of the Constitution, the Constitution provides that we, the people of Kenya, and we, the people, we are the supreme lawgivers. We are the ones who give powers to the legislators and people who enforce laws within the country. And the Constitution, from right the onset, it sets out clearly that we, the people of Kenya, acknowledge the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation. I think that points into the issue of religion, and also that we are proud, the people, as a people, we are proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity. And sector specific is the religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation. So this shows, and also Article 32 of the same Constitution gives us, the people of Kenya, all the people of Kenya, the right and freedom to, among other things, religion and diversity of the same. Therefore, we the people, we are free to form and partake in formation and also partake in the exercise of various religious practices and doctrines as provided for under the Constitution and as taught to us or as given to us by religious leaders and by various religious institutions.
Okay.
And that is to say, these religious institutions, therefore, are also governed by various statutes and laws of the country. And as a religious institution, one has got to go through a process for it to be fully registered and recognized as such. And this is the Societies Act.
Okay.
Through the said act and the subsidiary legislations, the subsidiary rules thereto provides for adequate, proper and key regulation of religious society. I think as the show goes on, you'll be asking questions as to whether this regulation provided for under the laws is proper and how does this regulation ensure safety and protection within religious environment.
But before we get into that, it begs the question of what really entitles to regulation in a country that has 4,000 churches. From where somebody might be sitting, 4,000 might be really a huge number. Then what is really regulation? Is it about the number of churches, given that 4,000 churches, looking into the issue of monitoring the number of churches regulated, given the license to operate in the country, is quite huge.
Regulation really doesn't go critically into the number. We cannot say the government, through the sector-specific legislation, has said the number of registered religious institutions cannot supersede 1,000, cannot supersede 2,000. So regulation is really not numbers. Regulation is into the matter's conduct, okay, and compliance by religious organizations. So if as many as how many religious organizations or institutions comply with the compliance requirements of the day under the sector-specific legislations, then we can have as many as religious organizations registered and allowed to conduct business through their mode of conduct of their business. So we cannot say it is about numbers, it is about compliance.
Okay.
So we cannot limit regulation to numbers. We can only limit it to strict observation and compliance with the requirements of the day.
Some have argued that given that the number is huge, the government then has failed to move beyond giving the certificate of registration and moving to monitoring the conduct of this particular religious institution, to the extent that cases like what we saw in Shakahola do not see the light of day. And even with the government, the Register of Societies moving to revoke the license of 5 churches has somewhat appeared to be a knee-jerk reaction following the Shakahola incident. The numbers, if the government cannot monitor the numbers, how then now do they allow such a huge number if monitoring is quite an issue?
I would repeat and say that arguments based on numbers in this topic, we can say it is far-fetched. It's a bit remote from what the topic of the day is, regulation and strict compliance and observation of the regulations mechanisms. When you talk about 400 churches within Kenya, 4,000, sorry, churches within Kenya that have been allowed to conduct business of churches, we cannot say that that is failure by the government through the sector-specific departments to time went by, although we do not have strict evidence as to what may have happened over time. The government feels like this organization has moved out, has breached its key objective of that registration. And that is perhaps doing or carrying out radicalization of their own key members, or indoctrination, or just carrying out teachings or practices that does not really observe the key boundaries of the objectives of the registration of certain religious organizations. So we cannot say that by allowing 4,000 plus churches being registered and some of them now derogating from their key objective is a failure by the government to conduct proper regulation. I think now what the government ought to conduct is to ensure when a church or a religious organization has passed through the mechanisms and the processes of attaining a certificate of registration to conduct its church activities and business, it is now the responsibility of the government through the key departments to ensure that these churches conduct proper religious business. And if an organization is not observing the key objective of its registration, then it is important and it is right that the government recalls their registration. As you have said, the government through the Registrar of Societies is now conducting a massive deregistration of these churches that have now derogated from its objectives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there minimum qualifications that are required for one to be, say, a pastor? Are they held to certain professional standards in the law?
Pastors now, the proponents of the school of thought or argument that pastors or religious leaders ought to attain certain irreducible minimum standards of qualifications is because church leaders can also be equated to professionals. And just like any other profession within Kenya is governed by various mechanisms and code of conduct, I think and I believe even journalists and media people are professionals and you're regulated by your code of conduct. Pastors, it is important that pastors as professionals should also be governed by certain code of conduct that takes into account certain irreducible attainment of certain standards to ensure that even as they conduct their business, they do so with credibility, with accountability, and strict observance of safety of the people that go into their worshipping and praise premises. So that is to ensure professionalism and security of the people who attend and partake in the services, the church services.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how possible it is it because some have argued that holding the pastors to a certain qualification, say to have studied theology or something of that sort, would interfere with the freedom of religion, because in some religion, some pastors wake up and say they dreamt, the Holy Spirit told them to start a church and save the masses. These are the last days. And for them, that is the expression of religion. How possible is it to ensure that they are bounded to a certain education requirement?
As I had said earlier, Irene, church leaders, pastors, and any other religious leader is a professional, and holding them to certain standards is not does not amount to discriminating against them or interfering with their activities or with their perceived natural qualifications. You've given us an example of somebody waking up today or tomorrow and saying through a dream they've had a call or they've had a vision that now they are properly placed to conduct church activities and to give people a proper leeway to heaven or something of that sort. We cannot trust certain sayings or revelations by people that this is what they have received. I think it is important for the government to ensure that a church leader is a qualified professional. If you tell us, if you're telling the people, if you're telling the nation and the world at large that you've been told, you've seen or you've dreamed that you're the real person to teach the people the right ways to heaven, I think it is also important for you to show us that in you conducting that business, you're going to do it in a more safe environment, taking into account that you are not going to radicalize, because we cannot just trust you. We were not in your vision. We're not in your vision. We are not in your dream. So how sure are we? What are the teachings you're going to serve out to the people of the country or to the large population? So we need to be certain that you're going to do it in a very professional and safe environment. And that is now to take into account qualifications like theology. It is common knowledge that if you've gone successfully through the teachings or through the course of theology and any other religious course, if you've successfully done that and you've attained the requirements, we can be all certain that if you're given a space to conduct a church business, you can do it within the strict confines of security and safety to the people.
All right. With Kenya being a secular state, has it weakened its, authority in terms of regulating religious institutions, given that as a secular state, you of course alienate yourself from either or of this religion?
It has not weakened, it has really strengthened. I want to refer you to the same constitution of Kenya. During your own free time, under Article 25, it provides for the fundamental rights and freedoms that cannot be limited. Now, under that provision of the Constitution, the right or the freedom to religion is not among those key fundamental freedoms under that Article 25 that cannot be limited. By limitation, what we mean is that we limit your practice or your practice of a certain fundamental freedom to the extent that it is not toxic to enjoyment of the same right or of another right by any member of the society. So Kenya being a secular society does not mean this right cannot be limited. We have to limit it within the confines of the law to ensure proper practice and proper teaching, so that we do not allow you during the said teachings or practice to derogate from the said practice and therefore infringe in legal corridors. We call it infringe or violate another key or crucial fundamental freedom under the same constitution. So by regulating and by holding religious leaders to certain key qualifications, indeed strengthens the exercise of the right, the fundamental right to religion, to ensure strict observance of not violating practice of any other fundamental freedom by any other member of the society.
All right, we'll leave it right there. We'll have to take our first break, but do stay with us. We'll be back with more, including the issue of taxation of churches. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. You're watching Law Matters. Tonight we're looking into the issue of regulation of churches and the recent moves that have been made by the government. Now, Wakili Nsogo, looking into regulation of churches, it will be amiss not to talk about taxation. And it has been quite a dicey issue. It has been a war between the Kenya Revenue Authority and the church institution, them trying to impede the efforts by KRA to tax them. What does the law currently say concerning taxation of churches?
Yes, under the Income Tax Act, that is the sector-specific act when it comes to regulation of matters, finances, and assets of churches. The act has exempted the church's income through avenues like tithings and offerings and any other platform that brings in revenue that is meant to further the interest of the religion or the interest of the religious activities. So such income is exempted from taxation. However, the church is not fully exempted from remitting a tax to the government at the end of the day, because the same tax act has enumerated certain activities. For example, when a church is envisaged or is seen to conduct business activities through ownership of assets and properties that now are registered as properties of a church, and those assets or properties are taken into business activities that now in turn will bring back income to the church. Now that is away from the normal tithings, offerings, and religious holy activities of making income. Now, if a church is in the activity of doing business through its assets and properties, then the income gained from that commercial or those commercial activities, like any other commercial activities, should be subjected to taxation rules and regimes of the day, and therefore the church ought to remit adequate, proper, and accurate tax returns to the government.
Okay.
Yes.
As an advocate, do you think that maybe it is time for the government to net into the taxes that comes from offering and tithe and all pledges that come from the religious institution, given that exploitation that is happening in the religious space is basically based on money?
Irene, if I say that the government should also now dip its fingers into a revenue collected from tithes and offerings and other platforms that are not fully business in terms of nature and color. I think religious leaders, pastors, clergies, and other officials will be persecuting me if I say that this is what the government ought to do. I think as it stands now, the law provides for what revenue that belongs to the church should be subjected to taxation, and just leave it at that point and say if the government through its timely repealing and enactment of new legislations and amendment of the existing legislations, if the government feels like it is appropriate and in order to also envisage taxing certain income that comes through tithes and offerings, then the government would have its own proper reasons of doing so. So I wouldn't like to take a side and perhaps give a stern direction that the government should take a certain or enact certain new regulations amending the existing legislative framework. So it is a topic of discussion and argument. Let's just wait and see what the government does at the end of the day.
Why that is a concern is because right now that the government is building a case on the Good News International Pastor Mackenzie, is that while trailing his finances, say the KRA PIN, to see how, if indeed there was brainwashing in terms of money being trailed to his bank account, they couldn't manage to get viable information on that, given that there was no existent trail in terms of money being, directed to his bank account, whether in the country or outside the country. Which now begs the question in terms of, given that you have talked about professional standards, for them having a degree, say, in theology or a diploma in theology, what then can be done to ensure that these individuals are netted on the aspects of their financial income, to the point that we can see it can create an avenue of having a solid case in case they have violated the principles of the law?
Thank you. I think what the government ought to do is to come up with a mechanism that clearly demarcates what revenue belongs to the church and what revenue belongs to the church owner or the church leaders or officials. Because going by your example that you've just highlighted a few seconds earlier, I think it is a bit difficult to alienate what funds really belong to the Good News Church and what funds privately belong to the church owner. I think the government has some bit of worries that some of these religious leaders may be conducting some bit of money laundering through their registered institutions, religious institutions. And that may be the case, but I'm not saying that is the case. And therefore, I think what the legislative framework ought to establish is a clear mechanism of knowing accurately how much does a religious organization brings or rakes in terms of revenue within a specific period of time vis-a-vis how much the church leader can rake in away from the church activity. By so doing, we can now tell how much money belongs to the church and how much money belongs to the church owner or the church leader. But not having a clear mechanism demarcating what belongs to X and what belongs to the owner, therefore brings a very big conundrum, trying to break down how much what belongs to where and what belongs to the church owner. So I think the legal framework should also bring another additional regulatory measure or lens to perhaps have churches declaring timely, within a short period of time, how much are they able to rake in from their members and also from their other activities that are meant to bring in income to the church. And that is going to now separate the financial income or the revenue income to the church vis-a-vis the income that belongs to the church owner.
All right. Now, that brings the question on the issue of managing assets in religious institutions. And the issue of managing assets is not only an issue in, mushrooming churches or churches that are beginning. We have seen well-established religious institutions such as Catholic Church and the SDA having wrangles, fighting in these holy institutions due to the issue of assets management. What does the law say concerning the issue of assets management in religious institutions?
Yes, asset management is quite a thorny issue in the flesh of a religious organization. And as you've rightly put it, we've seen different churches, various churches, from all divides of the doctrinal divides, fighting over management, ownership, and oversight, general oversight of the church or church assets. Now, The law on church assets is very simple, that a church can own a property, however, through what we call corporate surety, if I'm not wrong, but we can check that later.
Okay.
Through a corporate asset surety, then a church is allowed to own, manage, oversee church assets and properties. Now, church leaders are supposed to treat assets that belongs to the church as separate property from their own property, and that property is to be registered as strict property that belongs to that certain church or religious organization, and that businesses pertaining to those assets and properties that belongs to those churches, then is perceived to be strict business of the church and not the church leaders or the church owners.
Okay.
Yes.
So what happens when we are having the wrangles that we have seen for some time? Is it an issue that now escalates to court of law? What puts in place to ensure that in case there's a split, because most of these churches, what we see is there's a split. There's one faction that goes to this side and the other faction takes another side. What happens now to such scenarios, and what does the law incline to in such cases?
I think such conflicts are to be treated as normal conflicts, and both divides, or both sides of the divide, will have to now canvass their issues in a court of law, because if certain wrangles, property wrangles or asset wrangles, creep into a religious entity or organization, then a solution has to be attained, and a solution cannot be attained by those two sharp sides of the divide that are sharply conflicting on their assets or assets of the church. So what happens is the two sides of the divide are invited to canvass their issues in a court of law and argue out their cases, and of course a court of law will listen to both divides and mete out a more fair and just decision to the arising church assets conflicts.
Okay, what does the law say concerning the issue of assets declaration when it comes to religious institution? Because some of these institutions do not declare their assets to the government. Only when things get a bit, dicey is when now we realize that they used to own this and that. Are there penalties to cases whereby churches refuse to declare their assets?
Currently, through the Office of the Attorney General, there has now been a call for new regulations whereby churches are now invited to declare accurately assets and other properties that belong to those churches. And traditionally, before these new regulations, I think the new regulations are almost in place, and churches will now be required or demanded to declare the assets which they own. As I said earlier, traditionally churches have not been declaring their assets, and when certain conflicts pertaining to those assets now arose, that is when surprisingly everyone gets to know, oh, so this church owns certain prime properties or assets. But with the new regulations, the law will now demand that every church has to declare its assets. You remember saying rightly that churches have now embarked into massive business activities. Yeah. You can mention a raft of churches that are now own institutions of learning. They own healthcare institutions. They run various commercial high-end activities. And you see now those are activities that will rake in massively income or revenue into the churches. And not declaring those assets through which churches are now making income will render an inaccurate and lack of accountability by the churches in terms of remitting now their tax obligations. So the new regulations demand that churches will now have to declare their assets, and through those assets is where we get to know how much they rake in as income, and therefore the tax commissioner will be able to count the most accurate amount of tax that the churches are supposed to remit to the government. So asset declaration has now been a very critical requirement under the new regulations.
All right.
Yeah.
So looking into the issue of assets, questions have been raised in that, given that religion is something that is expressed diversely, people have different beliefs and they stick to them because that's their belief. When you're having religious institutions own hospitals, own learning institution, there has been the cry that if proper monitoring is not done, then this institution, say hospitals and learning institution, might be used to ensure that there is a room for radicalization, because these two institutions look into the issue of belief, the belief of science, the belief of right to education. How should it stand for religious institutions to own such cogs of institutions?
Yes, now, when churches are allowed, which they are allowed to own and carry out massive or high-end business deals or business activities or commercial activities, it is important for the government to ensure that these activities are conducted in an environment that complies with the current day regulations as put or as provided by the applicable legislative framework. As you rightfully said it, if these churches will be allowed unchecked freedom to conduct those activities, then there is a likelihood we cannot overlook the possibility of certain radicalization or teachings of very tough or hard doctrines. And therefore, we cannot just stay blind and say because churches are providing crucial services in our society, for example, learning services, health services, helping the elderly and the very young. I think that cannot go unchecked. The law, the applicable laws, have to ensure that these, even though they could be very crucial and important provision of services to the society, they are done within the confines of the regulations.
Okay.
Yes, and that does not now mean that the government is creeping its discriminatory or disturbing eye or checks into those activities of the church. That is to only make sure that as we allow churches to conduct their charitable activities and commercial activities, they have to ensure that the checks that are put in place to ensure safety and compliance of, let's say, quality and standards have to be strictly observed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there legal loopholes in the Societies Act, which was passed in the 90s to regulate the churches, given that the mandate of the Registrar of Societies right now, which is something she has said that her mandate ends at certification to give the license to the churches. Are there legal loopholes to ensure that much more is done to net some of these churches, which might go against their constitution and the doctrines that they have listed as part of them?
Certainly. Because, as again you've clearly said it, the Registrar of Societies, I think the current registrar is, her name is Nyariki. Yeah, her mandate, you see, she cannot act beyond the powers given to her by the legislation. If she does that, then she'll be held to be misusing her office or acting beyond the powers or functions given to her. In legal spectrum, we call it acting ultra vires.
Okay.
There's loopholes in that act. It is an archaic act, it's an old act that now does not provide for a strict regulation of the churches. Now, I think majority of the existing churches have now made use or they've taken advantages of the unchecked activities as the act, the Societies Act does not strictly give these powers to the Registrar of Societies to ensure in-depth checking and in-depth regulation and checks of the activities of the church. So yes, there are gaps, there are loopholes within that act or statute, and that is now the argument that has called for new amendments or checking the existing law and making sure that those gaps are bridged to ensure that churches now do conduct their business within very safe environment.
Thank you, Akil Nsogo. We'll have to take a short break on that. Do stay with us. We'll be back with more. Welcome back. You're watching Law Matters. Tonight we're looking into the issue of regulation of churches. This is our last segment of this particular show, bringing the discussion to a close on what the government should do and what the government is doing. Now, Wakil Nsogo, is it really easy for the government to ensure regulation of churches, given the move that has been done recently by Nyariki, the Register of Societies, which happens to appear like a knee-jerk reaction? 5 churches in a country that we are complaining about exploitation by religious institutions. Was it enough in terms of the war we are having currently?
It's not an easy task by the government to regulate the church, as evidently we have seen it happening in the current situation. We've seen that churches are now they're now challenging the directions and they're challenging the moves by the government in the courts of law, whereby they believe strongly and reading the Societies Act and reading the Constitution, particularly Article 32, and that is where I think most churches are drawing their arguments from, that the Constitution protects, recognizes, and should enforce the diversity and the freedom to religion. And as we had said earlier, the Societies Act has fundamental gaps. It has fundamental loopholes that, unless bridged, then the government of the day will face an uphill task in ensuring proper regulation of church activities. We have seen the quest to deregister and to recall registration certificates and licenses to certain churches being fiercely challenged in courts of law. We are yet to see the court's pronouncements in some of those cases. We are eagerly and we are yearning to see what those decisions are going to be. So you can see every government move in as much as it's trying to regulate church activities, it is being fiercely challenged in courts of law. So it's not easy, and unless the existing legal framework is correctly reviewed and amended, then still the government will face a very fierce task in trying to regulate activities of the church.
Can we, as an advocate, can we say that our legal system can derail the efforts that are being done so far to curtail the morphing of these churches that, you know, don't quite abide to the law, given that, you know, the freedom of worship is granted, and they say that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, yet we're having a Societies Act that is impeding some of these churches. How well can that go on, given that already the New Life Prayer Center owned by Odero has been granted the leeway to continue with its church operation?
That's a good question. We cannot strictly say that the current legal system is derailing the regulation or the regulation or oversight over the church activities by the government, because the existing legal framework or the existing legal system should be the one governing the disputes and the challenges posed by the gaps in the Societies Act and other sector-specific legislations. And that is why now we need to take these challenges to courts of law, which are mandated or tasked to interpret those existing legal systems or existing legal legislations, and by interpreting to now make out decisions based on the interpretations, the legal interpretations of the legal mind of the fact finders or the judges sitting and determining those matters. So, however, technically we can say again, yes, the existing legal system to some extent is derailing, but not really derailing, but is not really enhancing the government efforts to regulate churches. And this is because of the existing gaps as we have identified them. So unless and until these gaps are fully bridged and new legislations are put into place that really do not have a raft of loopholes, that is when we can say we shall have a concrete legal system that does not derail strict regulation of church activities. Yes.
Arguments have come about that, given that worship is largely seen as a belief system, something that somebody has chosen to believe, either Christianity or either being a Muslim or being a pagan or what have you, that the issue of regulation of religious institution is a war that cannot be won only on the legal context, but the intelligence context, given that some of these cases mushroom in the tiniest of village, in the remote of places. Is that the new battlefront for regulation of churches vis-a-vis looking into the certification and revoking of license, given that some of this radicalization mushroom in the remote of places in the country?
To some extent, I would agree that the legal solutions cannot be the only solutions to the challenges or to the conflicts, the religious conflicts that are rising up. It is important for the government as well to invite or to call these religious leaders or religious stewards, people who are believed to be experts and well knowledgeable in matters religion, so that they can, together with the government, they can compound and support the government efforts in trying to ensure that as they, as experts, ensure that churches conduct their businesses in the most appropriate manner, it is done so respecting the other fundamental human rights and not radicalizing or teaching people beliefs or ways that really are not in tandem with other existing fundamental legal frameworks. So I think it is critical, it's very important for the government to also invite stakeholders, very key stakeholders, religious stakeholders, and have something like a conference or a sit down with those stakeholders and experts in order to filter out certain key ailing issues that are facing religion in our country, and together come up with long-lasting solutions. Yes.
As a country, we have appeared to be liberal to a large extent when it comes to religious institutions, because we are largely a religious nation, even though we are a secular state. And in other countries, dictatorship has proved to be a tool to nib some of these cases. Case example in Rwanda, whereby they're quite strict when it comes to regulation of churches. As a country, is it a path that we might think of, turning into to avoid the scenarios that you have seen? Because those that have been exposed are just some of them that have come to the fore. Many others are silently mushrooming, in different parts of the country. Is that the way?
Irene, that's a very flammable concern, but I think it's correct, as you have pointed out, that various regimes in different states or countries have adopted somehow strict measures in order to combat and address issues religion, and maybe it has worked for them or maybe it has not worked for them. And in Kenya, as we say, we are a democratic nation, we are a democratic country, we are liberal, whereby we invite every view and opinion. So I would still stick to our earlier observation, where we had said that before perhaps we adopt very strict or the so-called what did you call it? These strict measures, dictatorship, or dictatorial measures. Before we get there, perhaps it is important, as a democratic country, as a democratic nation, we call upon the stakeholders and have a sit down and see what solutions we can find. And if a country will lack a solution, then sure, maybe it will have, as a last resort, adopt certain very strict measures in order to ensure sanity in our religious environment.
Right. Yeah. As an advocate and a legal expert, perhaps what changes should be done in the law, in particular now the Societies Act and other acts that might come in place to regulate churches? What regulations should be put in place to ensure that we are not having the current scenarios of exploitation from either of the religions?
First, looking at the existing legislation, it provides that before a church is allowed to conduct its activity, then it has to file a document showing its key objective and its key teachings. So I think what we ought to do as a country in terms of proper regulation is to ensure a mechanism or a tool that will time and again be scrutinizing activities of every church to ensure that they are strictly observing their registered objective and teachings. And if now we find out that an organization, a church organization, or an entity, religious entity, is derogating from its key objective, then it shall call for deregistration. So I think what we need to do is to amend briefly the existing legal framework to ensure our churches remain strict to its key objective and teachings. Okay. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Wakili Nsogo, for giving us your perspective concerning the issue of regulation of churches. It is quite an emotive issue. I've seen you successfully managed not to take a stand on issues that, you know, might cause an uproar and reaction concerning what should be done to religious institutions. Many thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that has been Wakili Nsogo giving us his perspective concerning regulation of churches, of course, saying there's more to be done. There are a lot of legal loopholes. There are a lot to be done in terms of monitoring activities of churches to ensure we don't have cases of massacres like we have seen on the Shakahola incident. Many thanks indeed for staying with us during this whole live 1-hour show. My name is Irene Mwangi. Have a splendid night.